every type of alien life hypothesis. Space is complicated. We make it simple. The universe contains an estimated 200 billion trillion stars, and as far as confirmed, verified evidence goes, exactly one of them has a planet with anyone living on it. That gap is called the Fermi Paradox. If the numbers are that big, where is everybody? And every idea on this list is a serious, real attempt to answer it. We're going in order from the most mundane explanations to the most unsettling ones, then we'll sort them a second way by whether the explanation is good news or bad news for humanity's own future, because some of these answers are comforting and some of them are genuinely not. The rare earth hypothesis. We begin with the explanation that attacks the premise of the paradox directly. What if life itself, or at least complex life, requires such a specific, unlikely combination of circumstances that Earth is a genuine statistical outlier, rather than a typical example of what a habitable planet looks like? The rare Earth hypothesis, formalized by scientists Peter Ward and Donald Brownlee in 2000, argues that simple microbial life might be common throughout the universe, but complex multicellular life requires an implausibly specific checklist: a large moon to stabilize axial tilt and prevent chaotic climate swings, a planet in the right kind of orbit around the right kind of star, a Jupiter sized planet nearby to gravitationally deflect dangerous comets and asteroids, plate tectonics to regulate the planet's long term carbon cycle, and a stable galactic location far enough from the crowded, radiation heavy galactic center to avoid frequent nearby stellar catastrophes. Here's the fact that should genuinely bother you. Every single one of these factors had to align simultaneously for billions of consecutive years without a single catastrophic interruption for complex life on Earth to reach the point of building telescopes at all. Remove any one item from that list, and Earth's history plausibly looks like most of the microbial only planets this theory assumes are scattered everywhere else in the galaxy. The Great Filter. Here's the twist: this isn't really a single hypothesis, it's a framework for organizing every other idea on this list, and it comes with a genuinely unsettling twist depending on where exactly the filter sits. The Great Filter theory proposes that somewhere along the path from lifeless chemistry to a civilization capable of colonizing other star systems, there exists at least one extraordinarily improbable step, a bottleneck so difficult that almost nothing successfully passes through it, which is why the universe appears empty despite its scale. Here's the fact that should genuinely bother you: nobody knows whether humanity has already passed the Great Filter or whether it's still ahead of us. If the filter is behind us, something like the origin of life itself or the jump from simple to complex cells being wildly more difficult than we assume, then we're rare but safe, and the emptiness of the universe is good news. If the filter is ahead of us, something like the tendency of every sufficiently advanced civilization to inevitably destroy itself through war, environmental collapse, or unforeseen technological risk, then Earth's silence isn't proof we're special. It's a warning sign that something is still waiting for us too, and we haven't reached it yet. The zoo hypothesis. Here's the reframe: what if the universe isn't actually empty, and we simply haven't been contacted because we're being deliberately left alone? The zoo hypothesis proposes that advanced civilizations exist, are aware of Earth, and have made a collective or individual choice not to interfere with humanity's development, treating us the way a wildlife reserve treats its animals, observed perhaps, but not approached, specifically to avoid disrupting our natural cultural and technological evolution. Here's the fact that should genuinely unsettle you about this idea: it's essentially unfalsifiable by design. Any absence of contact is exactly what the hypothesis predicts, meaning there's no observation we could make from Earth that would definitively prove or disprove it either way. It exists in the specific uncomfortable category of an idea that explains the silence perfectly, at the cost of being untestable by any method currently available to us. A closely related variant, sometimes called the planetarium hypothesis, goes even further, proposing that everything we observe about the universe beyond our immediate reach could theoretically be a carefully constructed illusion engineered by an advanced civilization specifically to conceal itself, an idea taken seriously by almost no working scientists. but one that illustrates just how far this particular branch of reasoning can be pushed before it stops being testable science at all. The dark forest hypothesis. Here's the pivot. This is the answer that reframes the silence, not as absence, but as strategy. Popularized by science fiction author Lou Chisholm, but grounded in real game theory reasoning, the dark forest hypothesis proposes that the universe is actually full of civilizations, and every single one of them is staying deliberately, permanently silent out of pure survival logic. The core argument goes like this: you can never be certain whether a newly detected civilization is friendly, and you can never be certain your assessment of friendly would even translate across a truly alien mindset. Meanwhile, technological advancement can accelerate unpredictably, meaning a civilization that seems harmless today could become an overwhelming threat within a relatively short time. Under this logic, revealing your location to the universe carries catastrophic potential downside and comparatively little guaranteed upside. So, the rational move for literally any civilization everywhere is to stay hidden and to view any civilization broadcasting its location the way Earth has been doing with radio signals for over a century, as either catastrophically naive or already doomed. Here's the fact that should genuinely bother you. Under this hypothesis, humanity's decades of intentional and accidental radio broadcasts into space aren't a neutral, harmless act of curiosity. They're a potential signal flare sent out by a civilization too young to understand the risk into a universe the theory assumes is full of listeners who understand that risk perfectly well. Panspermia and directed panspermia. Here's the fact that reframes the entire question of where life even starts. What if life on Earth didn't originate here at all? Panspermia proposes that the basic building blocks of life, or even microbial life itself, can survive the harsh conditions of space travel embedded within asteroids, comets, or interstellar dust, and could have been seeded onto Earth from elsewhere entirely, rather than arising independently from Earth's own early chemistry. Laboratory experiments have shown that certain hardy microorganisms and even some organic molecules can survive extended exposure to the vacuum and radiation of space under the right shielding conditions, lending at least plausible mechanical support to the idea. Here's the fact that should genuinely bother you. A more extreme variant, called directed panspermia, proposes this seeding wasn't accidental at all, that life on Earth, or the essential molecular building blocks for it, may have been deliberately sent here by an earlier civilization, a hypothesis taken seriously enough that even biologist Francis Crick, co-discoverer of the structure of DNA, floated a version of it as a genuine scientific possibility late in his career. Here's the part that lingers. Even if panspermia is entirely correct, it doesn't actually solve the Fermi Paradox at all. It just relocates the original question of where life truly began somewhere else in the universe, without answering why that somewhere else also appears to be silent. The wow. Signal and the case for active searching. Here's the fact that should genuinely bother you before we get to the more philosophical entries. On August 15, 1977, a radio telescope in Ohio, scanning the sky as part of a search for extraterrestrial signals, detected a 37-second burst of band radio energy so unusual and so strong that the astronomer reviewing the printout circled it and wrote, "Wow," in the margin, giving the event its lasting name. The signal matched several key characteristics scientists had specifically predicted an artificial intentional transmission might have, and it came from roughly the direction of the constellation Sagittarius. Here's the fact that should genuinely unsettle you. Despite extensive follow-up observations of that exact patch of sky over the following decades, the signal has never repeated, never been explained with full scientific confidence, and never been definitively ruled out as artificial either, leading candidate natural explanations, including a passing comet's hydrogen cloud, remain disputed by other researchers who worked the original data. Here's the part that lingers, the wow. Signal is the closest humanity has ever come to a genuine, unexplained candidate detection, and the fact that one unrepeated 37-second anomaly from 1977 is still the best evidence we have after decades of dedicated searching, with the search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence and its successor programs tells you almost as much about how difficult this search actually is as it does about whether anyone is out there transmitting at all. The simulation hypothesis. Here's the twist that questions the entire premise of the search itself. What if there simply is no other civilization to find? Because the specific reality we're observing was never designed to contain one. Philosopher Nick Bostrom formalized this argument in 2003, proposing a logical trilemma. Either civilizations reliably destroy themselves before developing the technology to run high fidelity simulated realities, or advanced civilizations that could run such simulations choose not to for some reason, or we are statistically almost certainly living inside a simulation right now because a sufficiently advanced civilization could plausibly run an overwhelming number of simulated realities compared to the single original one. Here's the fact that should genuinely bother you. If the third option is correct, it would trivially explain why the universe appears otherwise empty of other civilizations. A simulation built specifically to study or observe humanity's development would have no particular reason to populate the rest of an unimaginably vast universe with anyone else at all, since nobody is actually there to look. Here's the part that lingers. This hypothesis, like the zoo hypothesis, is currently unfalsifiable by any method available to us, and most physicists treat it as a fascinating philosophical exercise rather than a genuine scientific explanation, but it remains one of the only ideas on this list that doesn't just explain the silence. It questions whether the entire premise of searching the universe for other minds was ever a coherent question to begin with. The sustainability solution. Here's the fact that closes this list on its most quietly hopeful and also most sobering. Note, what if civilizations that survive long term simply stop expanding outward and broadcasting, not out of danger avoidance like the Dark Forest, but because unlimited growth and colonization turns out to be an evolutionary dead end, and truly advanced, long lived civilizations instead turn inward toward sustainable, low footprint existence that produces far less detectable evidence than the loud, expansionist radio broadcasting phase humanity is currently in. Here's the fact that should genuinely bother you. Under this theory, humanity's current, highly visible, rapidly expanding, resource intensive phase of civilization might be a temporary adolescent stage that every surviving civilization eventually outgrows, meaning the reason we haven't detected anyone isn't that they're dead, hiding, or absent. It's that they've matured past the exact behaviors that would make them detectable to a species still as young and loud as we currently are. Here's the part that lingers. If this hypothesis is correct, the silence isn't proof of emptiness at all. It might simply be proof that we haven't grown up yet. Let's sort these 8 again a different way, not by how exotic they sound, but by whether the answer is good news or bad news for humanity's own future. On the comforting end, the rare Earth hypothesis and a great filter safely behind us, both implying Earth's rarity and success, are simply an unusual but survivable statistical outcome. On the neutral end, the zoo hypothesis and simulation hypothesis, both essentially unfalsifiable, offering no real prediction about what happens to humanity next either way. On the genuinely alarming end, a great filter still ahead of us, and the dark forest hypothesis, both directly implying that the greatest danger to civilization hasn't happened to us yet, or that we've already made ourselves a target simply by being detectable at all. And on the aspirational end, the sustainability solution, the one entry on this list that frames humanity's current loud expansionist phase, not as a permanent identity, but as something we might, with enough time, eventually grow out of. It's worth being precise before we close about what would actually change the entire conversation this video is built around. A single confirmed detection of anything, anywhere. Current searches have expanded well beyond listening for deliberate radio broadcasts, now including efforts to detect technosignatures, indirect evidence of advanced technology such as unusual atmospheric chemistry on a distant exoplanet that could indicate industrial pollution, or biosignatures, chemical markers in an atmosphere that are difficult to explain without ongoing biological activity. Here's the fact that should genuinely bother you. Several candidate biosignature detections on distant exoplanets have already been reported in recent years, and every single one has been met with immediate, rigorous scientific scrutiny and so far has failed to hold up as definitive proof once alternative, non biological explanations were fully ruled out or couldn't be ruled out. The bar for a confirmed detection is set deliberately, extremely high, specifically because a false positive announced to the public would be almost impossible to walk back credibly, meaning every hypothesis on this list remains exactly as valid and exactly as unconfirmed as it was the day it was first proposed. Here's the last thing worth sitting with. Every hypothesis on this list is consistent with the exact same piece of evidence: total silence from a universe containing more stars than there are grains of sand on every beach on Earth combined. That silence hasn't been resolved by better telescopes, more sensitive radio receivers, or 70 years of active searching. It's simply been reinterpreted again and again into every possible shape a species desperate to know whether it's alone could imagine. Not bad for stick figures on a rock.